Num num. Birdie num num.
When I have understanding of computers, I shall be the supreme being. God isn't interested in technology. He knows nothing of the potential of the microchip or the silicon revolution. Look how he spends his time. 43 species of parrots. Nipples for men.
Don't do that, Jesus Christ! You're gonna get me killed! Out of here!
Oh, Billy.
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Yes, we do live in a world where men have nipples and you cannot milk them. We also live in the world where Cthulhu has not risen out of the ocean to wipe out our miserable race. But what else can we do? Certainly Cthulhu likes to interrupt shows, and he interrupted last week's show. But now we are doing a redo, and we are going to go through with it. My name is Miguel Connor. I am your Pompadour of Gnosis. I'm an alligator. I'm a mama and a papa to you. I'm a space invader. Welcome, everybody, to AEON BYTE. And today, very excited to finally get this show on track. We've got Mr. Richard Weber, the hardest working man in the cult show business. Richard, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah. I don't think that the demons and the AEONs are going to bother us today. I drew a magic circle around me, and I put the triangle up to trap them all, so we're safe.
Oh, good deal. Yeah, I forgot. I told myself I'm going to burn some sage tonight because we need all the help we can get. So I am burning my sage incense, and I will put it down with us, and it will be awesome. Hopefully I don't burn the house or my hand. There you go. You go over here. And with us, too, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. I'm not sure that the AEONs are going to leave us alone, though, because I had a little emergency just before the show, and look who showed up in my backyard. Can you see that? It's a snake.
Oh, cool. A snake. Wow.
Yeah,
that's a good omen.
Yeah, it's a garden snake, I think.
Oh, I thought it was a coral snake.
It might be a coral snake, too. I think you might be right. But anyway.
Poisonous, yeah.
No, he's got
really
a little thin head. He's got a little thin head. Whatever he is, he's not
When I
poisonous.
lived in Utah, I went out to clean my pool one day, and there was a possum floating in there and a coral snake, and I went, "Oh, I don't know who won. I guess they both lost."
Yeah, I don't think he's a coral snake. We're going to talk about snakes all tonight. That would be interesting. Coincidence.
Certainly reptilians of some sort. A very, very big kind. Bigger than the dinosaurs. Awesome. Well, I would say that the snake is a symbol of Sophia, so it has to be a good omen. But yeah, anyway, seeing people go into the chat. Excuse me. Richard, of course, always does excellent research, really goes deep, and he will provide an amazing presentation on Lovecraft, the Necronomicon, Grimoires, and secret societies. You will learn something new no matter how experienced you are, and if not, you're going to get a treat because it's a whole new dimension. Not much else. If you have any super chats, please, if you have any questions, please super chat them so we can separate them and get to them. The comment section is filling up pretty fast. Not much housekeeping. We got some exciting shows. A show on occult Germany this week. We've got a show on a useful show on how to use gnosis and magic to heal trauma and PTSD. At some point this month, we will get Chris Knowles with his new book on synchromysticism. Niall from Gnostic Informant is going to join so we can talk some mythology. There'll be a show on the alchemical secrets of Harry Potter. So a lot of good stuff. So please support this show in any way you can. I can't do it without you. Even if you could like or subscribe, whether on your YouTube, the other video platforms like Rockfin, or Rumble, or if you're listening on a podcast provider, give us some good ratings or let us know how we're doing. Don't forget Astronosis is August 9th and 10th of August. Tickets are selling well. and the schedule should be out, and we actually have some interactive workshops and meditation exercises that tie into Sophia, the theme of astronosis. So that's it. Well, Richard, why don't we get started? Let's do this again.
Yeah. Do you have to activate something for my slides? I've got them.
I
Oh, there we
just
go.
did. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Had me worried. I thought, oh no, not again.
And this is the problem this time. Yeah, my God.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, our topic is the Necronomicon, but really what we're going to talk about in general is ceremonial magic, because that's what the Necronomicon was supposed to be all about, right? Period.
Yeah.
But we got to go into the real creator of the Necronomicon first, right? Howard Philip Lovecraft. Now, Lovecraft, I'm sure everybody's familiar with, but just that aren't, was a pulp fiction, horror, gothic, Eldritch horror writer, mainly in magazines in the 20s and 30s. He was born in 1820, but he died really young at 46 years of age in 1937 because he had intestinal stomach cancer in And he wasn't diagnosed when we'd call it stage 4 now, 2 months before he died. So apparently he didn't keep up with his doctor's visits or anything. But in doing research on him, well, let me come back to him. We're going to have to explore the other grimoires, because the Necronomicon, according to Simon, is supposedly a grimoire, a book on black magic and the arts, right? So I'm only going to talk about Western magic and esotericism, though.
According to Simon?
Yeah, well, supposedly the million-selling paperback book of the Necronomicon was written by Simon. But the strange thing is the copyright says Peter Levinda. And I've got proof exactly who wrote it, and we'll get to it. Because
awesome.
His contemporaries have totally spilled the beans, But to this day, he swears that there's a guy named Simon who wrote it, And unless he's schizophrenic, I think I'm going to get into why he's doing that, So we're going to explore that. And then we're going to go into the modern esoteric groups like Freemasonry, the Rosicrucians, Theosophy, Scientology, the Mormons, and the early beginnings of the OTO, and a Freemasonry sub-branch called the Rite of Memphis Mizram, that was began in Naples and then was picked up in France. And they still, if you ask any 33rd degree Mason, they won't even know what you're talking about with that. But from I can find out, it still exists. So anyway, getting back to the show. Okay. I think that the conclusion I've come in studying all this is to quote Aleister Crowley. If you're going to start a new belief system or a new religion, you have to have a charismatic leader, which they all had, right? And you got to have a great backstory, something to give it pedigree, authenticity, make it sound ancient and mystic, right? Just like he did with the Necronomicon, and just like all these esoteric societies have done. Now, I want to say at the outset, I'm not bashing anybody who's into Mormonism or, Theosophy or Freemasonry. Scientology, they can just deal with themselves. I don't think anybody has to, if they want to defend themselves, go for it, right? Just go for it, So, but I do think if you're going to be a member of an esoteric organization, you've got to know the truth about the person that started it and the truth about what it was really based on. And unfortunately, I'm finding in all these instances, it's made up on fairy tales and myths. There's no reality to any of it. And well, that goes from all the ones I mentioned, and even Crowley's Book of the Law. They've come up with definite proof that the whole thing was made up, and really concrete proof. But in OTO, they put the Book of the Law right there on the altar, like it was the Quran or the Talmud or the Bible or something. And they'll probably argue, well, the guy I'm quoting actually was a high-ranking OTO member. So, he was just as disillusioned as the rest of them all. Anyway, back to Lovecraft quick. When he was he grew up in a Protestant family, and they were very strict. But they told him when he was about 5.5, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. So by the time he was 7.5, he concluded, well, if there ain't no Santa Claus, there ain't no God either. There's no big man with a beard up in the sky. You know, it's just me. So he was kind of positive yet, you know. And then he started having these nightmares that he called night gaunts. And what really got him going was his parents gave him a copy of 1001 Arabian Nights. And he reread that thing over and over his whole life. He just loved it. And I think that's what got him into the fantasy world that he explored. Even though he explored the darker half of it, he just loved fantasy. Okay? So anyway, and basically he was never recognized until long after his death, you know. He published in Weird Tales magazines and stuff like that. I mean, all his stuff is short stories. And I don't know, I reread some of them last week, and nothing really long enough to even be a novella, just short stories. But he got his hands on this. Well, we'll get there. So he later, by the time he was a teenager, became a total atheist. Pragmatist. Then he switched from maybe being into paganism and the Greek gods and myths and stuff because it was more fantasy, right? So he became totally interested in science, and he wanted to be a scientist and a professor. But they called it melancholia back then. And now you can see that he suffered from chronic depression in his childhood, his middle school years, his high school years. And there was like 5 years in his life, he was just gone from it, didn't do anything. And then when he finally got out of high school, he was going to go to Brown University. And after about 6 months there, depression knocked him right off his feet again. So basically, I don't think he could have held a job, you know. Writing was the thing he did. So what he really did to pay the bills, I don't know. But I got to imagine he was a starving artist his whole life, you know. But he did make great connections. Now, one thing that bugs me about this is being a writer and writing fiction is, you know, do people think that Tom Harris, because he wrote Silence of the Lambs, is a serial killer and a cannibal? No, they know he's just a writer. But you can see all over the internet, people are saying, oh, well, Lovecraft had to be an occultist. He had to be a Freemason or a Rosicrucian. You know, I even saw one where it said he read Crowley and he contacted Crowley and became a high-ranking member of the OTO. That's all bullshit. He was an atheist and a pragmatic person. He didn't believe that there was a benevolent God out there at all. So, and here's the Arabian Nights, and here's Geiger's. I love Geiger. You know, I wish I could have seen that Broadway production with Frank Langella where they had Geiger did all the back sets for it. You know?
Oh, wow.
But I got a funny aside story. At the same time he was doing it on Broadway, Yul Brynner was doing The King and I. So Brenner's agent called us up and said, hey, come on, I'm going to take you to the 21 Club for dinner. So he said he got in Brenner's limo. And Brenner, you remember those old-fashioned light bars they used to have for photography? Well, Brenner would shine it out the window at the paparazzi so they couldn't see a thing. So they get to the 21 Club, and Brenner gets up and gives a toast, and he says, you may be the Prince of Darkness on Broadway, but I'm the king. Actors, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, so historians have done a deep dive into his existing library. Somebody saved it, right? And they cataloged the whole darn thing. And the only books that you could even say remotely are occult are Fraser's Golden Bough, which everybody has. It's not really a cult. It's a study of religion, from folk religion to Fraser's present time. And he did have the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's not really a cult. It's just ancient magic and religion. But he had one that you could kind of call that way, the Malus Maleficarum, which is the witch's hammer, that was by Cotton Mathers, I think. And it was for the witch trials, to find a witch, interrogate a witch, how to punish a witch. And, what's the old thing about if she sinks, she's a witch. If she doesn't, she's a witch, right? When they tried to drown them, right? So any of this stuff about him being into the occult is just pure hogwash. He would just laugh right in your face, And the Necronomicon, got so popular. Well, he and like August Derleth, he created phony books too. And being they would put their phony books in each other's stories, And I was reading, I think it was The Hunter in the Dark the other night. And he quoted the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Fraser's Golden Bough, right there in the middle of the story. But the other thing they found out too was some of the grimoires he quoted were stolen right from Edgar Allan Poe because, in the House of Usher, Roderick Usher lists all the grimoires he has on the shelf. And guess who copied them right out of the House of Usher? Lovecraft, right?
Of course.
Plus, they were able to look in his Encyclopedia Britannica and found all sorts of marginal notes about other things he copied right into his stories. But if you notice in his stories, he never elaborates on what was in the books. He just goes on with the story. It's just to set a mood, basically. That's all. So anyway, the Necronomicon became so popular, though, that people were going to the libraries and trying to check it out. The librarians were laughing their heads off, saying, there's no such book, and people wouldn't believe them, But that's people, So anyway, his mad Arab. Now, the trope that if you read the Necronomicon, the trope is just like a boilerplate trick used by horror writers, right, and thriller writers. And I guess you could have a trope in a romance too, the wedding, something like that, right? Is that if you read the Necronomicon, you'll be obsessed, you'll go mad, and you might even be torn apart in the streets of Damascus by demons like the mad Arab Abdul Azrad was, according to the legend, right? I have a funny story about the Necronomicon, though. I was working in Border Patrol, and I had a supervisor who had a master's in philosophy from DePaul. And you would walk in his office to talk, and he'd always be reading. He had nothing on, and he'd put his finger and he'd close the book and talk to you. And I looked at him and I said, is that the Necronomicon? And he went, yes. And he kind of pulled back, got serious, Well, I didn't know the legend, about going insane or anything like that. And I just heard of the book, I said, well, when you're done, could I borrow it? With a straight face, he goes, I don't think I can be responsible. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, my roommate borrowed it and he went off the deep end. Then he shared it with another friend. The other friend ended up in a psych ward for 8 months, So I eventually went to the bookstore, got it myself and looked it up a little bit. Well, you didn't have the internet back then. And I went back to him and said, you son of a bitch. You just reeled me right in with the base story of the Necronomicon. Oops. Where'd I go?
Oh, your camera went down.
Oh.
Well, keep going as long as we hear your voice.
Yeah. Well, maybe it'll come back. That's weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think I bumped anything down there. Anyway, as long as you hear my voice. Yeah, I'm not that pretty anyway, right? Anyway, so now we get into his belief system was cosmicism, it's called, okay? In other words, there's no benevolent God. There's no angels out there. There's maybe some sort of demons, but they're primordial. His belief was that the universe was cold and heartless, and it didn't give a damn. He didn't believe in the permanence of humanity, that we had anything to do but fend for ourselves and struggle and fight just for our daily bread, our existence at all. So he became like a follower of Nietzsche, whose famous line was, God is dead, right? course, Nietzsche kind of meant society killed him off, but in Lovecraft's belief system, there is no such thing. So, and that fits with his writing with this eldritch existential dread that you feel by the last 2 pages of any of his stories, right? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you still there? Okay, good.
Yeah, we're all there. We're listening.
Okay. I couldn't see you. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we
So-
just made the thing bigger so people can see.
Oh, okay, great. Where he got, there's this old thing in writing and art and everything is amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Well, Lovecraft stole this whole idea of a book that would drive you mad from Robert Chambers. His famous work, if you know horror, is The King in Yellow. It was a series of short stories that were interconnected and had this cosmic dread to them. But the trope was that if you read the play from beginning to end, you'd go mad, you'd be obsessed, and you'd be doomed
What was the trope?
forever. Yeah. So that's The King in Yellow.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm
Did
there.
we lose him?
No, I
Hello?
hear. I can hear him.
You can hear me? Yeah.
Yeah,
I lost you
Yeah, I
too.
don't
Can
know
you
what
hear me,
happened to
Ben?
my-
Can anybody hear me?
yeah,
I
I can hear you. I can hear you.
I can hear you. I don't know what happened to my camera. Weird.
Somebody read the wrong page of the Necronomicon.
I think so. It's going to act up. Anyway, don't need to see me. I got the slides, right? So anyway, that's where he's coming from, and that's why his stories are just as dark as they are, right? So anyway, Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates have decided to call Lovecraft the father of American Gothic horror. Because I don't know why not Poe, but I guess, well, King has weird tastes. He didn't like Kubrick's The Shining, which I think is insane, but what can I say? Now, there's been, of course, Hollywood's just grabbed, here's, okay, what happened to my slides?
Oh, yeah. Hold on a second. There you go. Let me get your slides back up. There you go.
There we go. There's the Mad Arab, and there's Chambers, The King in Yellow. If you haven't read it, it's like Lovecraft. It starts slow and it just draws you in and draws you in and draws you in until you're kind of like scared to death. Anyway, but modern films have been made of it. The Dunwich Horror with Dean Stockwell, if you remember the old Quantum Leap original show. Mm-hmm. And that teenage heartthrob that was married to Bobby Darin, Sandra Dee. I guess she just wanted to change her image and be in a satanic movie, apparently. And then more recently, Nicolas Cage starred in The Color of Outer Space. And there was, what was the name of that HBO series? That Lovecraft Country, I think?
Yeah, well, excuse me. It wasn't very good. They tried, but yeah. Color Out of Space was really good.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, Cage chewed the scenery, but he always does. That's Nicolas Cage, right? Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, moving on. Now we're going to go to.
Oh, wait, 1 second. For the audience, of course, True Detective Season 1 is based a lot on Chambers, The King in Yellow.
Oh, really?
But anyway, just throwing out that, they actually mentioned, I think, A King in Yellow. But
was that the one with
Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, and Woody Harrelson?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I saw
definitely
that.
Got a little, and it's there.
It is. I'll have to rewatch that. Huh. Anyway, well, here's Simon, or Peter Levenda, a.k.a. Simon. So to understand how this all came about, you remember Mr. Peabody and Sherman? They take a trip back in the Wayback Machine.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, for our younger viewers, it was a Saturday morning cartoon. I think it was on Bullwinkle. Yeah, it was a segment on Bullwinkle. Anyway, we got to go back to Brooklyn, New York, and New York in the 70s because it was a very, very strange place, to say the least. Well, let me go back a bit. You had all this stuff going on. In 68, Rosemary's Baby came out. In 72, this Warlock occult shop in Brooklyn that Lavenda worked at was opened, right? Okay. And then supposedly in 72, Simon, not Peter Lavenda, discovers this manuscript of the real Necronomicon, right? 73, The Exorcist got released, okay? 76 was the summer of the Son of Sam, right? 7 murders, and he finally got arrested in July of 76. In October 12th of that year, the Grand Lodge of the OTO resurrected itself, because if you kind of know the history, after Jack Parsons died, and that was the last OTO lodge functioning in the whole world, it just disappeared, period, until the 70s again. Okay, then in December, he had a Necronomicon party at the Inferno Disco in Manhattan. In December, see, they first put out a hardcover and they just put it in the window. It wasn't until 1980 the AEON Books picked it up and did it. You know, and I found out something else about, talk about black magic books. Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. Do you know the real story behind that?
No. Is this a short story?
I looked it up, but it's true. People think that he wrote it and then, you know, got an agent. No, AEON Books, after The Exorcist and all this stuff was just making money hand over fist, they went to Anton LaVey and said, can you write a book on Satanism? And we'll publish it, whatever you write.
Really?
So, he wasn't some great marketer or had the inspiration to do this at all. AEON Books, you know, I wish a publisher would come to me and say that, but that's the real story behind the Satanic Bible too. Crazy.
The real Satanists went to him.
Yeah, for real. Well, he was what, a lion tamer in the circus and everything. He was something else. I mean, he did have some intellectual things, you know, but baloney. And you know, his daughter, what's her name? Zita. And she's married to that guy, Nicholas Schreck. Now they're both Buddhists, and he's got a band called the Werewolves in Europe, and he travels all over and lectures. You know, he's very knowledgeable about esotericism and the occult, but he's got his head shaved, and he's always wearing like those Nehru shirts, you know, and everything. It's a little strange. Okay, then in 84.
Well, I hear Xena, they like to compare Xena to a Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's so much. What about the age difference? Hello, do the math. You know, I mean, I don't think Taylor
adrenochrome or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor couldn't even be her daughter. She'd have to be like a distant cousin or something. You know. No. Well, they always compare Barbara Bush to Crowley too, but you know, that one I'm not sure of, because they were both. Her mother and Crowley were in Paris exactly the same summer, and they said the months don't jive for her to have been pregnant by her husband, but we'll never know who Barbara's real daddy was. But she sure as hell looks like him. Anyway, then in 84, this is important. Lavenda broke it off, he says, with the OTO and the Magical Child Bookshop. Okay, so now we get into the bookshop and the story here. Oh, but one other thing. The Son of Sam Murders, there was a book that was put out by Murray Terry. Did you ever read it, The Ultimate Evil?
No.
Yeah, his theory was it was the Process Church, a branch of them, that had pretty much a satanic group going on in Brooklyn and Yonkers at the time, and that Berkowitz did not act alone. And Berkowitz has said in prison that he did not act alone. Then he retracts it and says he did. But the police did find in Yonkers is a park. I forget the name of it. It's kind of old and not really populated. And there's like some abandoned concrete areas and tunnels and stuff. And they found all sorts of satanic signs and sigils. But the weird thing is they found mutilated German shepherds. Now, what was it that Berkowitz said told him to do this? Remember?
His dog.
Yeah, a black German Shepherd.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
that was also going on at the same time in Brooklyn, when you think about it. So it's a weird melting pot of stuff going on. And the movies, like I said. So this is the actual like hardcover one that they first published. You know, it sold maybe 1,000 copies. And then this other one is the AEON version of the book. So now the Magical Child Bookshop. It started in Brooklyn as the Warlock Shop. Okay. And this guy, Herman Slater, who, well, I think they should make a movie out of this. These are such characters. Herman Slater was gay and he was Jewish. Right? And by the time Lavinda and all this started to click, he was already middle-aged. He had a gay lover named Ed Buzinski, who was, you know, blue-eyed, 20-something, blonde hair, everything. But Slater had bone tuberculosis, and he lay in bed for like a year, it said, in a 300-pound cast for his everything. And what convinced him not to give up being a traffic control expert and an insurance investigator was he thought he levitated across the room one night because wearing this cast, he woke up on the other side of the room in a chair. I guess it never dawned on him that maybe somebody moved him over there, right? But that was his eureka moment.
To levitation.
Yeah, I mean, crazy. Well, he was a high priest in the Wiccan church, and Ed was a high priest in the Welt Wiccan church. And at the same time, the Wiccans were fighting, you know, like, mine's older than yours is older. I'm the true one, you know, I'm the one from Gerald Gardner. No, you're not. I'm the one from the Welsh folklore, you know. But they all frequented this Magical Child shop. Well, he started with the Warlock shop. He was making so much cash. He said, we need a bigger shop and we got to get to Manhattan. So they closed up the Warlock in Brooklyn and they moved to Chelsea in Manhattan, which is kind of like, you know, Soho, Greenwich Village kind of area, you know, avant-garde, artsy area.
Right.
But Herman, get this. This is from Lavinda's description of him. He had a severe limp because of the tuberculosis, right? He had one eye that miscast to the right. So when you looked at him, he never looked directly in the eye, okay? He just kind of stared off, right? And sometimes he was totally flamboyantly gay. You know, most of the time he tried to play it straight. But sometimes he'd come in wearing taffeta and a red bola. He'd be wearing earrings and a wig and makeup and red lipstick. And Lavinda described him as looking like Henry Kissinger in drag. If you look up Herman Slater on YouTube, you can find some video interviews he did, and there's one where he's doing like a magical ceremony, but he does look a lot like Kissinger, you know. And he's definitely Jewish. I'm part Jewish, so I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying he's really classically Jewish, right? So anyway, the shop was something else. The new one it was just stacked to the shelves, and the ceiling was stuff, right? So he sold, you know, grimoires, candles, ceremonial daggers, I think they call them MYTHOS, right? Herbs and robes and swords and black candles and red candles and skulls. And one thing he did is he took chicken bones and he told people they were actual human fingers from a coffin. And of course, graveyard dirt, you know, you name it. Herman had a saying of something like, well, if you want it, we can't get it. You didn't want it anyway. Because he was a real character. But now the weird thing about this, so you had all these neo-pagan groups. You know, you had the Wiccans. You had, well, like Leviticus said, the people who are into the Renaissance fair, and they're into horror, they're into sci-fi, they're into Wicca, they're into the occult, Esther. There's kind of an overlap in those groups, you know, and I'd say it's kind of like, I mean, I like going to the Renaissance fair, but some of those people are just, you know, they live to be there every year. You know, they get kind of obsessed with it. I'd say it's kind of a what would you say they share? Kind of like Freud would say, a magical belief system.
Well,
For the
a
Renaissance fair?
passion. Yeah, a passion.
Yeah.
Nostalgia,
I mean,
extreme nostalgia.
yeah, extreme passion for it. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, this was the kind of group that was all going in. They were going in and out there. And, Herman bitched about the Wiccans. You know why? Because when they did their ceremonies, they were naked, sky-clad, and they wouldn't buy any damn robes. That was his biggest markup item. So when he did his stuff, he always made sure he was wearing a robe. Well, okay, so behind the counter, they had a back room with a black curtain. And this is where the Wiccans started to get together for their rituals. It was kind of the founding of the OTO in New York again, because, well, it was starting in California and New York, both coastal, right? And into this mix walks Peter Levindo. Now he's an odd duck too. He wore like dark business suits and a thin tie, and a button-down shirt. He carried a briefcase. He was very soft-spoken, articulate, very knowledgeable about occult and esoteric, right? And aloof. Just kind of, I think he did this to project power. He looked more like somebody from Madison Avenue than an occultist, right? He didn't even have a telephone. That's how aloof he was, right? And the strangest thing about him, I found out in reading his Dead Names, is back in like 1972, where the draft was still raging for the Vietnam War. I don't know if I think one of you remembers that.
I do.
But you used to, if you didn't have a high draft number, you were kind of like, I might be going out in the next ship or the airplane or whatever you want to call it, So anyway, what was I saying? Oh, the Greek Orthodox Church kind of allowed this secondary branch called the Slavic Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church to be formed. And the only thing you had to do was show some Slavic heritage of some kind, which is a pretty broad brushstroke, Slavic heritage, right? So you could start your own chartered church and you could ordain priests. And the one that started the church didn't have to go to seminary, and none of the priests did. So guess what Peter Levindo and his best friend did?
Became Slavic priests.
Exactly. And gee whiz, I guess they didn't have to go to Vietnam then, did they? He doesn't say that in his book, but it's pretty fucking evident, He doesn't say what his draft number was, but I remember, I think I was a freshman in college, and I joined the ROTC just to be safe, because I didn't want to go. Anyway, so he comes in and he's giving all these classes. Yeah, hold on, she's bringing me some more tea. Thanks, baby. Okay, cool. Anyway, so Levindo's giving all these classes in the back room about Enochian magic from John Dee and all this stuff. And they said he did have a way of explaining it simply to people who were really that versed in it, So this is all going on. And like I said, it was one of the centers in the East Coast for the resurgent of the OTO, and that's Grady McCurdy. He was a major in World War II in the Army. He briefly met Crowley when he was in London, made an appointment to go see him a couple days. And he's the one that actually finally inherited the whole mantle of what he claimed was the, what would you call it, true lineage from Crowley of the OTO. Anyway, that was going on too. So here's here's Herman, and I'm not bashing the gays. My son's gay, but these two are really characters, okay? And that's his blonde, blue-eyed lover there, Ed Basinski, okay? So what it is this guy, Alan Caleb, worked at the Magical Child for like a couple of years. So he was an absolute contemporary of Lavinda and all these people, Herman and everybody, right? And his wife, Bonnie, was a high Wiccan priestess and a quasi member of the OTO. Okay. So he wrote for the New Yorker, which was kind of the competitor for the Village Voice back then in New York, right?
Right.
And he wrote this article called "The Doom That Came to Chelsea." And he spills all the beans about what really happened with the Necronomicon. And he's saying that Lavinda's story is all, well, pardon my French, but bullshit, you know?
Right.
Because Lavinda says that part of it's true. There was these two characters, I forgot their names, and they really were arrested by the FBI for stealing arcane and valuable books from the Yale University Library, okay? But Lavinda's story is that the Necronomicon, the actual manuscript, was one that they stole, and they gave it to his friends Pansky for safekeeping. The rest of the stolen goods. And one day they were looking through the files and they found this cardboard box with a green string, and they opened it, and there's the Necronomicon. Oh my God, you know. And I'm saying,
Love it.
He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But what's sad is some of the people believe him. That's what I don't understand. Even to this day, you got people that say, "Oh, the book's real. It works. It works. It works." So anyway, what happened was actually they took it to Herman, right? They called him Horrible Herman because he would yell at the customers and everybody, "Get the fuck out of my shop," you know. Really tempered guy, you know. Great guy, but you know, he can love you one minute and hate you the next. So they said, we can make, you know, what really happened, they realized they could make a fortune with this, you know, because he was already making money hand over fist selling all these occult items in the Magical Child bookshop, you know. So Lavinda's story is that they were looking this over and it was all in Greek. Now, why it was in Greek, who knows? You know, it doesn't make sense either. It was supposed to be ancient Sumerian magic, you know.
Right.
So, and Lavinda's looking at it, but he recognizes one word, Inanna. And he goes, "My God, this is ancient Sumerian magic. I know."
Wow, that settles that. Yes.
Yeah, that settled that right there. Right? And then he goes on to say that he got people who were at his Slavic church, 3 groups of them, and he divided the books in 3, so none of them had the whole book. You know?
Wow.
And he said they will all be nameless to translate the Greek. You know, of course, he's not naming anybody to verify that they ever did it, of course, right? You know?
Right.
So, I mean, it was concocted by Peter. He did the writing, okay? Herman published it. John Wasserman, pictured right here, who's been in the OTO his whole life, and he's a pretty respected member of the OTO. I don't think he's like, I don't know. They're all a little crazy, but, you know, he presents himself fairly decently anyway, but he's wrote tons of books on Crowley. So he designed it, okay? Because guess where he worked for? Wiser Books. You know, and Wiser Antiquarian that publishes all these great esoteric books and is a great, does a great job of publishing these things, you know, everything from the Book of the Dead to Crowley. I mean, you name a magic book or esoteric book or Gnostic book and they publish it.
Right.
Anyway, and then the third guy is Larry Barnes, who was a cokehead, but he was an artist and his dad had the printing company. So Larry drew all those supposedly Sumerian symbols and sigils, you know, but well, we'll get into that in a minute anyway. So what I'm saying is, if you take any of these grimoires we're going to look at, they're all made up on a story. You know, none of them are really, well, first of all, most of the ones from the 13th, 14th, 15th, 17th century are not written by the guy who was on the cover, right? The Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon are not written by Solomon.
It's not written by Solomon. Oh my God.
No, and the
Everything's
Pope
crashing down in my life now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and we're gonna get.
Are you okay too, Vance? Are you okay?
And,
yeah, more or
you're a
less.
Freemason. I hate to
I'll
tell you,
live.
there's no historical or archaeological documentation whatsoever, despite the Jewish archaeologists fighting to find it. They can't find it after all these years that King David or King Solomon ever existed or the temple. There's just nothing to prove it except the Bible, right? And there's not much historical or archaeological evidence. You got all these apologists that try to spin it, but not really, Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is Lavinda had the right idea, right? Make a mysterious character and, get a mythos behind the book and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But the book is dangerous. So what happened later then is, well, Lavinda also got to be really close with Norman Mailer, the famous author, right? And he wrote The Executioner, but he was dating Norman Mailer's assistant. That's how he got so close to him. And Mailer even wrote the foreword to Lavinda's book about Nazis and the occult, the Unforeseen Forces book. That was a best.
The Norman Mailer?
Yeah, the Norman Mailer.
Oh, wow.
If you look at the book, the foreword is by Norman Mailer. And I wonder, when I first saw that, I said, he doesn't believe in this shit. What the hell? But apparently Lavinda put his spell on him too. Well, he was screwing the guy's secretary. So anyway, this is, I don't mean to mention Crowley, but the OTO just permeates all this stuff I'm finding everywhere, So to celebrate the book's release and everything, a prominent DC attorney had a party at the Plaza Hotel in New York. So it wasn't a small affair. The guest of honor was Grady McCurkry, the new head of the OTO. And the other one was Kenneth Anger, the avant-garde film artist, filmmaker. You see the picture of him there on the bottom. And, well, the scene I think up there is from Lucifer Rising on the right. His movies are strikingly visual, but if you ever listen to him lecture, he wants to be Crowley himself. If you notice the tattoo on his chest even says Lucifer, He just something else. And then the other one was I forgot. Marjorie Cameron, right? She starred in this other movie, Resurrection of the Pleasure Dome, right? And she was had this red thing and long fingernails and all that. And you remember who Marjorie Cameron was, right?
Yeah, she was the rocket science guy. What's his name? Parsons'
last wife when he blew himself up in the garage. Yeah, but she was also, well, we'll get into that when we get to Scientology. That's where she really comes out. So quickly, the academic issues, problems with the Necronomicon. And I looked this up on the internet. I consulted with Justin Sledge and all these people that really know about Sumerian magic and the language. And they're all saying it's a pistache. It's just a satire of what a grimoire was. And Lavinda actually first made it to test his students in the back room and have them realize there's something terribly wrong with the grimoire. And we'll get to that in a minute.
Interesting.
So it was designed as a booby trap, okay? Because there are 3 important steps in ritual magic. Do you know what they are? Oh, I forgot. At this time, Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy came out. And yeah, I remember reading that and I'm like, what is he talking about? But I've got to find out, And then, of course, Anton Wilson was really close with Timothy Leary and, the Guru of Modesty at the time. So There was a resurgence in the occult metaphysics all at this time. I would say that they just kind of played right into the whole thing. So anyway, ceremonial magic, right? We're talking about the Western tradition, and the most common one is what they call Solomonic magic that they get from the greater key and the lesser key of Solomon, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 occultists or ritual musicians practice that. Okay. So the booby trap is that he only gives you the first step. Well, no, it's not even the first step. Okay. You've got to protect yourself. And most rituals, like the Abramelin, want you to fast for days or weeks before. They want you to be in devout prayer before you even attempt any of this. Try to get your head on straight, in other words, right? Okay, then, before you even summon anything, you see the lower diagram?
Yeah.
You have the magic circle with the names of the archangels and God and Hebrew and different things, right? And then you do what's called the lesser banishing ritual, where you face one direction, you say, Raphael before me, Michael to my right, Gabriel behind me, Uriel to my left, Metatron above me. And Crowley added all these, drawing the pentagram in the air and putting the finger to the lips for silence, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to show there's a method to this. It's not just hocus pocus, So now you're going to summon them and you're in a safe place, right? But you have to bind them, right? You can't just have them floating around the room, right? So you make this triangle, right? See the triangle above it?
Yeah.
And you put like the Tetranonomicon and names, but see the circle inside? Now, I don't know if it's true, but this guy, Poke Runyon, who's does a lot of videos, and he's got his own ceremonial magic cult out in California. It dawned on him that triangle was a mirror, like John Dee used, like an obsidian mirror, or what you call black mirror, and that what he does, like in his video, he has the woman stand in front of him in the circle, and she's holding 2 candles. The room's very dimly lit, and she's staring into the circle or the mirror. He stands behind her and does all the mumbo jumbo and the incantations and the calls and all that. But she's the medium, the scryer that says what's in the mirror, But there's that old thing of Mary, 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 Bloody Mary in the mirror. And, I looked it up. I forgot the word, but there's this physiological thing that if you stare at yourself in a mirror in a dimly lit room, your face will start to morph. It's just something physiologically your brain does. So I would say that could, well, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't believe in angels and demons. So, but, and then the last thing you need to see, you've trapped the angel or demon in there, right? Okay, then what? You got to say, well, thank you very much. I appreciate all your help and your knowledge and all that. Now you may go in peace and leave me alone. Okay, but the Necronomicon that Govinda does only teaches you how to summon them. So like Sled said, it'd be like inviting a tiger into your room and just hope for the best. I mean, but in a later version of the Necronomicon, in the foreword, I see he changed it. Apparently, he got about the criticism. He says, well, here's his excuse. These gods in the Necronomicon are thousands of years older than the Judeo-Christian, the Egyptian gods, and the Greek gods. And all this Judeo-Christian magic and so won't work against them because they're moon gods. And Solomonic magic is sun gods. But then in the next paragraph, he goes, but if you really want to be careful, draw a magic circle and a triangle and pray and fast, and also make sure you have a healthy, not mentally ill mind before you even read this book. So but I see a pattern with this. They all go back on what they say when they get caught, and they make up some more bullshit to go along with it.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? No, but there are. Well, the other thing I'll just go over briefly. He takes Semitic, or Akkadian, Babylonian, and Semitic languages, which actually a pro-Hebrew form. And he puts it all in there trying to say it's Sumerian, and it's not. They said it's kind of like taking the Greek gods or the Roman gods and trying to put them on top of Celtic gods.
Right.
It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So anyway, and the other thing, I mean, he says he quit the OTO in 1984. Okay, but he published a book called The Dark Lord. Okay. And in this book, it's all about, oh, well, wait a minute. I want to go into Jung quick. Okay. How are we doing on time?
We're fine.
Oh, okay.
We're hitting about an hour, so we're fine.
Okay. Good. Okay. Let me get down. I got to bring Carl Gustav Jung into this. And I made a little podcast with my wife. And, you know, she's got 2 PhDs in psychology. And, well, she explained it better than I could, really. I was going to have her do it, but she kind of bowed out on me, you know. Oh, wait a minute. I got to go back. I'm up to theosophy. Well, that's a whole nother story there, too. Yeah. That's Carl Jung. Anyway, Jung actually believed that you could use ritual magic to merge your shadow self with your consciousness. All right. But he said you have to do it with great caution, you know, and I think my wife put it succinctly because I said, like, for example, what if I'm doing ceremonial magic and I don't contact any demons? All I want to do is bring in angels, right? That should be safe. And she said, well, that all depends. You know, what Jung is saying is you can become obsessed with that archetype of your shadow self, right? You're supposed to recognize it, you know, have a healthy mental state, and then integrate it into your consciousness. But if you aren't careful with ritual magic, it'll dominate your conscious, you know? And you see these people online going, well, I contacted Beelzebub last week, and he's telling me he's guiding my life right down the tracks. And I've contacted Pamion, and he's helped me a lot with my studies. And these people, well, I think my wife Wendy said best. When you turn control of your life over to some supernatural entity, you're devoting yourself all responsibility for your actions and your path in life, right? And it's just not going to work. So I was surprised that Jung said, you can kind of use it, but it's very dangerous. And you can become, well, like Crowley, you know, Machiavellian and kind of a maniac. And
yeah, well, yeah, if you leave your shadow out to play, it's like leaving the devil without the triangle. Eventually you got to integrate it.
Right,
Don't let it just run around your life.
But see, what I don't understand is you can kind of superimpose modern psychology onto these ceremonial rituals, you know? Because if you're fasting and you're praying, and, you know, if you create this imaginary, because advanced occultists will say you don't even have to draw the circle, you can just visualize it. You can visualize the triangle and that. But if you think about it, that's kind of what Jung is saying to do to control what you're delving into in your shadow self, right? But I don't think most people, what I don't get is, did these people understand some, I don't know, collective unconsciousness or Akashic record knowledge of psychology that they don't seem to have possessed? You know, why is there this
people?
Huh?
Who's these people?
Oh, the people that wrote the grimoires in the 17th century, and, you know, and all the way back to like the Greek papyri texts with their magic, because they all.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jung did say that the Gnostics got the collective unconscious. They just called it the pleroma, and they said, well, The
Mhm.
mind of the God is in the mind of the human. It's, macrocosm. So it's one and the
Right.
same. We
Yeah,
are a reflection
hermeticism.
of God's mind.
Yeah, it's true. But I think the danger is most people playing around with ceremonial magic don't get that.
No, no, they're still living in a Cartesian universe. Not
Yeah, they're just playing around, and it's okay, and everybody in high school had a Necronomicon, but if you're going to really play around with it, and you're the least bit mentally unstable, it's going to really
Yeah,
it
yeah,
might,
yeah.
it
Well,
might put you in the psych ward, literally. Okay,
yeah, I
so
think that was
anyway,
either Timothy Leary or Aldous Huxley said, "An idiot on acid is just an idiot on acid." It's
yeah.
not gonna. You got to take care of the things underneath the hood before you can really play with these things.
Well, I asked my wife too, and I said, "Well, what?" Because she recently, well, in the last 20 years, graduated and got her PhD. I said, "But Jung didn't actually explain in therapy how to actualize this integration because he was so busy coming up with the theories and everything and the
Right.
archetypes. So I said, "You said, would you say that he would recommend that you have to be in therapy to do this?" And she said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
Because you can try to do it by yourself, but it's a dangerous road to try to, be your own attorney or doctor, plain English, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
And most therapists are Jungian, but good luck trying to find a good one. But I think we all have our own paths in trying to integrate our shadow self.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So anyway, this is what I was showing about these various gods that he mixes up in this thing. There's good old Pazuzu from The Exorcist, and then there's Rabushu, who's a vampiric demon, actually, from Babylonia. So he just throws it all together in a mismatch. I said it's kind of like he went to Wikipedia today for his research. That's about as scholarly as his research was, right?
In the old days, Gary Gygax is just throwing all these monsters into Dungeons and Dragons, and here it is.
Oh yeah, I never played that. Well, Jerry Farwell said that was satanic. You can't play Dungeons and Dragons. Oh my god! And Purple Teletubby was gay. Oh yeah, I was talking about. This is Kenneth Grant. Now he was Crowley's secretary for the last 2 years of his life. He thought he got the mantle from Crowley, and he fought with Grady McCarthy over it. And have you ever heard of his Typhon order? That's what he calls it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about him, I tried to read his book, Outer Gateways. It just gave me a headache because he mixes UFOs and aliens with Lovecraft mythos and magic, and the three just don't really seem to jive to me that much. But it was basically, and he stole a lot from that Austin Spare, who, well,
Chaos
you
Magician.
could say he's the modern father of sigil magic, where you make a sigil, where you make love, and then you launch it when you have an orgasm,
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people love his books. I don't know how they can understand him because one minute he's talking about UFOs, and then the next minute something else. So anyway, these symbols at Lavinda were made by an artist. They don't, they're not even remotely Sumerian at all. And Wicca, really started with Gerald Gardner, despite what Margaret Marie O'Hare said about, the old origins and all that, Now, Mathers, well, we're going to get into him. I'm going to do the golden Blavatsky quick and then the golden. Now, up in the left corner here is the Greek Magic Papyri, or the GPM. They're not sure, but it was probably, aside from the Egyptian text, it's the oldest text they have on magic. It was like 200 BC, compiled to 700 AD. Mm-hmm. So, like I'm kind of saying, how many of these books can you say are real? They were all made by various authors and kind of all thrown together by somebody. And so what's real and what's not real? It's just, I think, if you want to believe it's real and it's, you're not harming anybody, then why not? Okay, now we're going to go into Madame Blavatsky. Or wait a minute. Oh no, we got to do. Well, Mathers, right? Samuel Liddell Mathers became head of the Golden Dawn, right?
Mhm.
He and Crowley were best friends at first, and there's a carryover between the Golden Dawn and Blavatsky. We're going to get to. But I got to go into this thing about Solomon because we're going to talk about the Freemasons here, right? And 80% of their lower degrees are all based on this myth of King Solomon and the Solomon's Temple. And they, the first 3 degrees, with the trowel and the compass and the the board and everything, all
Mhm.
relate to lower understandings for the lower members. And the 3rd degree really is talking about brotherhood of brotherhoods with brothers and protecting each other, right?
Mhm.
But to go briefly into the legend of Solomon. So Solomon was this great king, and he had all these wives and this big kingdom, which there's no evidence of, and 300 chariots and everything. And they thought they found the stables in Megiddo, but they couldn't find any remnants of any animal bones or carcasses, no matter how far. So if there was like these giant stables, there would have been some dead horse remains, right? Logically. Anyway, so the legend, this stuff just breaks me up. That a young man in Solomon's employ came to Solomon and said he was being cursed by a demon. And Solomon said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, he's stealing my wages and my food, and he's sucking my thumb at night.
Mhm.
I'm not making this up, right? Well, what does that remind you? Reminds me of the succubus, right? That came to young men
Right.
at night, and it was euphemism for having a wet dream, a nocturnal emission. I guess they didn't understand what. Well, I guess not knowing physiology, they would think it was weird that would just happen in the middle of the night with no woman there. Apparently, my mom was in nursing school, Catholic nursing school. The nuns used to say, "Those naughty boys are blowing their nose in the middle of the sheets at night."
Oh no.
And my mom thought about what? No, they're not. So anyway, so Solomon, different versions, Archangel Gabriel Michael came to him, gave him this magic ring. And he said, use this to control the demons to build your temple, right? So in one version, it says Modius, the demon, and he appears and he drives this magic ring with the Solomon seal in the demon's chest, and the demon has to call the other demons, they have to start building him a temple, right? Well, but the Talmudic rules or whatever said you can't use, you have to use unhewn stones. In other words, no tools, right?
Right.
So Solomon goes on this mountain. He comes back with this magic worm.
I bet he was a magic worm.
Yeah, the shamir. And the shamir eats through the stones, and therefore all the stones for the temple were unhewn stones. So it followed right through, right? So, oh yeah, I was talking before about, borrowing. That's what they did. They just borrowed these famous historical figures, whether they existed or not. I mean, you got the, Grimoire of Hope Honoris, and then you got the 6 and 7 books of Moses. I mean, they were written, well,
Mhm.
there's a lot of debate on whether Moses ever actually existed either,
Right.
But now there's a couple of actual grimoires that have the real people's names on them. The Doctrine and Ritual of Hope Magic by Alphonse Lévy. Okay, he was Alphonse Constant, and he was in France. Okay, and then Dr. John Dee, of course, he has his name on the book, and he actually wrote it. Then we have now Lévy is most famous because he drew the first Baphomet in that book, right? And it's been kind of corrupted into being the devil, and that's not what he meant at all.
No.
And then the other most famous one and referred to as Cornelius Agrippa's Occult Philosophy, which he actually wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And he was quite a scholar. Now we're going on to Elena Petrovna Blavatsky. And her journal, that's her journal there, the Lucifer. I don't know why she picked that name. It was pretty controversial even back then, but she did. She did.
Just to be transgressive and
I know, I guess. Oh, no, we can't go to that yet. So, yeah, I mean, in occult and esoteric, you know, and I agree, Satan and Lucifer aren't the same thing. Any real academic Bible scholar would tell you that's bullshit. It was just misunderstood and contrived that if anything, Lucifer was the king of Babylon. I mean, you have to look at the time things are written in, you know?
exactly.
And of course, I think the Rosicrucians have an interesting attitude. They say that Lucifer is not Satan, but he's this bright, brilliant light that can also bind you and keep you away from, you know, your real gnosis and actually reaching enlightenment in the Godhead, you know? So, you know, I don't know. All these different theories. Anyway, Blavatsky is something else. She was actually Ukrainian, but it was controlled by Russia at the time. So most people say she was a Russian immigrant. We don't know much about her first husband, but history kind of picks up with her during the age of the spiritualists, you know, the floating tables and the table wrapping and the ectoplasm appearing in seances, right? And that's how she started her whole career, is doing seances with ectoplasm and table wrapping and table rising and all this stuff, you know. And I don't think Theosophy really, that's the problem I have with the Theosophical Society. They want to bury all this truthful stuff about her and all the negative stuff, you know. I mean, if it's true, just leave it out there and let people judge for themselves, right? So anyway, so she did that for a while. Then she came to America. Now, the weird thing is, she came to America, and according to Rudolf Steiner, who was originally very much into theosophy, and then he broke off and started his own anti-theosophy group, and he actually still has a college or university in is it Sweden or Switzerland? I can't remember.
Switzerland, I believe.
I think so, Switzerland. Yeah, it's got weird design buildings and all this stuff too. But here's something I found. Well, I'll get to that quick. There's so much duplicity with these people. Okay, so there's so much. What I found is plagiarism, deceptive stage magic, out and out fraud, and manufacturing of documents and letters that are made out of whole cloth and not written by who they claim to add pedigree to their faith. And Blavatsky was really knee deep in this stuff. So according to Steiner, she went to the Americas and a Black Lodge took her in. And she was delighted because, you know, she's being, I mean, he didn't say Masons, but it must have been the Masons. But they had ulterior motives. They wanted to use her psychic abilities to control demons or gain knowledge and power to control people and do all these nefarious things. So somehow she realized this, according to Steiner, and fled back to Paris. Well, until that time, she said she was in communication with the secret chiefs, the Great White Brotherhood.
Right.
But after that, when she went to Paris, then some East Indian occultists approached her, and suddenly the secret chiefs became the Mahatmas, which were East Indian adepts that lived forever. So her story just totally changed there, right? Of course, Steiner said she was also duped by that group. So I don't know if he was just paranoid or just, I don't know what he was basing any of this on at all. But she was additionally, so she met in New York Henry Steele Alcott, who was a spirit medium at the time, okay? And they were both just doing the table wrapping and all this stuff. So I said about the secret chiefs, right? And there's a bleed over with the Golden Dawn because they thought they were in contact with these secret chiefs too. So anyway, she published her journal, The Lucifer, and then they changed it to Lucius Trust because it was too, I mean, she published stuff like Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, stuff like that. But the problem is plagiarism, for one thing. And one other thing about Steiner, I looked it up and documented it and found a picture. You know what he was wearing when he was buried?
No.
OTO regalia.
Really?
And in 1906, Rudolph, Theodore Roos, the head of the OTO, conferred a charter on him and made him the head of the lodge. But you'll never hear of that from anybody that follows Steiner. But if he was, and it doesn't make sense to me because I've read all his stuff and he's talking about Christ consciousness and all that.
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
How the hell he could have been involved with the OTO too beats me. But like I said, there's a lot of duplicity and, well, you'll see, I'm going to speed this up a little bit, but the OTO and all this dark stuff just permeates all these esoteric societies. Well, anyway, she went to India. She hired this 15-year-old kid named Balabula as her servant, right? And she had this cabinet, right, on the wall. And she would get these letters from the secret chief, the Mahatmas, to her, right? And she'd show the cabinet was empty, and then she'd open it, and there'd be a letter suddenly appear.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's discovered there was a damn hole in the wall, and they dropped it down to the chute, to the cabinet, I mean, come on. And this scholar of Eastern literature, Arthur Lilly, published there were over 150 instances of plagiarism in Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled. I mean, if you're going to quote somebody the whole page or 2 pages, you got to put a footnote and acknowledge where you got it from. But she never bothered to do that ever. And I think she would know that that's what you're supposed to do when you publish something, right? Then he analyzed the letters and he found that her expression, her spelling, her choice of word, and based on peculiarities in her own writing, that she wrote the letters too. Now, here's where I laughed my head off. Henry Steele Alcott, her paramour, said that, well, she was a psychic, you see, and she would frequently fall into trance, and she could recite all these books she never read.
Oh, there you go.
Just say that she was wrong and she should have put a footnote or, come on, It just, the more I look into this, the more the bullshit gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, she did introduce Hermeticism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Hinduism and all this stuff to Western Europe. So you got to give her a little bit of credit.
Oh, yeah.
But, like I said, when I tried to join Theosophy, they said I had to go to these Bible studies so I could understand what the Secret Doctrine and the Isis Unveiled meant. And I said, I could probably teach that. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead to the Golden Dawn and their bullshit. So it was founded by Robert Woodman, who was a medical doctor, and Willis Scott, who was the deputy coroner, and Samuel Lydell Mathers. They were all Freemasons, and they belonged to another Rosicrucian order at the same time. Okay.
Do you need to move the slide, or are we still?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, there you
go.
There's can't see which one's which there. Well, anyways, one's Woodman and one's Wolcott. You can see there in all their Masonic regalia. That's Mathers in his leopard skin. And that's Israel Regardi, who is also Crowley's secretary, who got in big trouble because he published this famous book about all the rituals of the Golden Dawn that was supposed to be absolutely secret. And on the right is this alleged cipher manuscript, kind of like the Necronomicon, right? And supposedly, there's all sorts of stories, It was found in the leaves of a book in a used bookshop, and then they used Prometheus's code from the stenographia to translate what it said, right? And inside there was a letter from this German lady, Anna Springel, Sor Sapiens, of the Lodge of Luxor in Germany. And she conveyed upon these gentlemen a charter to establish the Golden Dawn in England. Well, there is no such lodge. There was no such person as Anna Springel. And they actually think that Mackenzie, who wrote the what was it called, Masonic Encyclopedia, that he was a member of a similar lodge, before, kind of a precursor to the Golden Dawn in England. But they took that, okay? Oh, the Royal Masonic Encyclopedia, he was the author of, right? And he was a group of member called the Society of the Eight. So he wrote these rituals for that order that predated it, right? They didn't come from some cipher manuscript that somebody made, right? So I wouldn't even bother with the Crowley stuff right now. So the whole thing's a bunch of hogwash, totally. And then as soon as he got the order wrong, guess what happened? Anna Springel, they got news she died. She just died.
Of course.
Yeah, just disappeared. And then, of course, Mathers took over the thing, and then there was this fight with Crowley and everything. But if you remember, Florence Farr was like Angelina Jolie or something back then, a famous stage actress. And when Mathers was trying to reclaim his title over the Golden Dawn, he told her that the cipher manuscripts were just bullshit. So she said, well, that's it. Then we're just canceling the whole order. Fuck it, So, I mean, what I'm seeing here is just a total pattern of bullshit, And I guess Crowley was right. You got to have a backstory that people believe, And I think, I'm not a Christian. I was raised a Catholic, but the Bible's a nice backstory, I guess. That's the way I look at it myself.
Yeah. Well, at least we can trust politicians.
Yeah, that's right.
Talk about the real magicians.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene says the Jews, started those fires with space lasers.
Space laser, that's a great one, yeah.
She's period. Well, I saw Dr. Phil, he interviewed Trump the other day, and I thought he was enticed. Not. He was bitching because all the witnesses, were in on that conspiracy, and they got deals to testify. And the anchor said, that's the way it works. You get the lower people to turn on the big guy. That's the way all prosecutions work. And he goes, well, show me an example. And she said, I'd have to bring out garage fills of case law to show you that's how it's done, you idiot.
No. All right, let's get back to the occult.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, well, we went with the sucking the thumbs thing. I'd never heard that before. I didn't know that. I don't know if you do that or not. Okay, so we're going to go down to, well, the Rosicrucian, it's pretty simple. They have this thing where they found Christian Rosicrucian's tomb and all the symbols and the books were there. Then they had the manifestos that came out in 3 groups from Germany, all this stuff. But they're, they know who wrote them. It was, I've got it written down here somewhere. But the more interesting one is this rite of Mizraim and Memphis, where they took the rite of Mizraim and combined them together. And what they did is they brought all this Egyptian gods and occult knowledge and, well, I guess that would be it, into Masonry, right? because they called it Egyptian Freemasonry, but it was, Hermetic, esoteric, ancient Egypt, and all this. And it was started in Naples. And then this guy, guess who promulgated it from there in 1902? John Yarker, who was also putting together the OTO. Then he was succeeded by Theodore Roos until 9/13 when he died. So, and Theodore Roos was the head of the OTO, period. So it just, it boggles me that there's all this cross. I don't know. They're all playing footsie under the table, if you know what I mean? Seems like. I don't know. And then old Cagliostro, remember him? Supposedly kind of like Saint Germain. He was involved in the Rite of Memphis and all this. Anyway, so that's it. So then from this Rite of Mithram, they came up with the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, right? And then now I read some stuff that said that Crowley and Roos had a real falling out. But the actuality, they didn't have a falling out till Roos was older, had a stroke, and Crowley said, well, maybe he's not capable of running things anymore. So that's, it's kind of like a grumpy old man saying, how dare you accuse me of, whatever, Anyway, let's get into, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this was a good one. I forgot. There's Roos in the OTO. There's the Egyptian, right? And there's Pikes, Marls, and Dog. But, I've talked to, and this is Rudolf von Stauffenberg, head of the Thule, which was kind of the precursor to National Socialism. Of course, when Hitler came into power, he closed every Masonic lodge and every occult or esoteric group and got them all out of Germany. I guess because he was afraid of them, I think, basically. Yeah, von Stupendorf. So Crowley, of course, took over the OTO and created Thelema, right? Now, his new religion, there's a hoax to the whole thing. There's a guy who's a high-ranking OTO member, and he's done the research on the Book of the Law. And it's just amazing what he found out. Remember, the story is that he was on his honeymoon with Rose, and he went to Cairo, right? And he did a rite in the Great Pyramid, called the Undead God or the Unliving God, I think it's called. And Rose said, they're coming. They want to speak to you. They're calling you. And he said, who? And she said, oh, I don't know. Horace? Somebody named Horace? Supposedly, this is so much bullshit. Supposedly, then he takes her to the Burlak Museum in Cairo, and she sees the style of revealing as the OT, and there's an image of Horus. She said, "That's who's calling you." And the inventory number on the display, of course, was 666. What a coincidence, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, there's problems. For one thing, the Burlak Museum closed in 1875, and he was supposedly there with Rose in 1904. I mean, and like I said, if it's made up, there was no way for him to know that, unless he sent a telegram. He couldn't look on the internet and find this stuff out, He'd probably been there in the past and just, never thought of it. Now, the original manuscript of the Book of the Law just seems to have vanished. They said that this Karl Germer, who was also a big chief with the OTO, had it, and he turned it over to the U.S. OTO eventually, but nobody's ever seen it. But this Richard T. Cole goes on to tell the story how Crowley was golfing with a printer in Scotland when he lived up in Boleskine House, right? And he was bitching about how terrible the quality of typing paper was. So his friend later gifted him with a new improved typing paper because he was a printer, right? But guess what? It didn't come out till late in 1905 or 1906. Okay. Now, there's a reason I'm saying this. When Crowley was at the Abbey of Selima in Sicily, right, he took the original Book of the Law and he put backing on all the pages. Now, why would you do that? He didn't do that to anything else. And most of the stuff that they have from him was all in his diaries, not a written manuscript ever, you know, because it was real-time notes of what really happened, you know?
Right.
So the problem was that this new paper, when you held it up to the light, showed the watermark. And if anybody checked, they'd see that the paper he supposedly wrote this on in 1904 didn't exist in 1904. So, gotcha. Interesting, huh? And in Crowley's notebook, there's 5 pages ripped out. And like I said, nobody would have dared to ever touch one of Crowley's notebooks, you know, at the time or years later. That was like, you know, the Book of Mormon or the Quran. You just don't rip pages out of a Crowley notebook, right? And dates were written over to jive more with his story, right? And there were verses in the style of revealing that supposedly this AWOS spoke to him with automatic writing, right? That were scribbled in later that he had forgotten. Apparently, the god AWOS forgot, you know, the verse to the style of revealing somehow. He must have been suffering from dementia, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. But, you know, Crowley had a wicked sense of humor. And he was a trickster. Like there's that story where he lost a bet. And the bet was if he lost, he'd take all these 12 people to the I can't remember that fancy restaurant in London. That was, you know, like a 5-star restaurant. And the bill came, so he pulled out his wallet and he had a £1,000 note, which was like $200,000 nowadays. So they couldn't cash it, so the other patrons had to chip in and get the bill. That was just kind of nut he was. But other people have said, if you look at the name of the entity that supposedly dictated this, it's AIWAS, right? If you drop the A, what does it say? I was. So if you ask the question, who was the author of the Book of the Law?
Oh, I get it. I was.
It's right there. And see, that's the kind of a weird sense of humor he had, you know? And he thought, well, those idiots don't get it, you know, fuck them. But, you know, somebody will get it and laugh about this, you know? And then supposedly his bullshit story about Theodore Roos coming to him out of the blue, they never met, pounding on his desk saying, you've revealed all the secrets in your book of lies with this, how to suck seed and suck eggs, you know, for 69. Well, he admitted later that he must have had that wrong because he just didn't remember it right, because he's sure that he didn't actually write the Book of the Lies till after he'd been in the OTO for a couple of years. So, I mean, he just, they fuck up, they goof up, then they make an excuse, and they come back and go, no, that's how it really happened, you know? But I thought the one with Blavatsky was best, that she just somehow channeled all these passages from these other books, you know? So, let's forget Mormon. You know the story about Mormonism, right? And the angel came, gave him the gold plates and all this, and then
we could do a whole show on that one.
Did you? Yeah, but it was let's just move on to good old Ron L. Hubbard, right?
Always a good time to kick him down.
Yeah, kick when he's down, right? But one last thing. Spencer Lewis, that was kind of the founder of the Rosicrucian Order, the ARMRC in California. He borrowed extensively from Crowley's writings in his journal, The Equinox. Literally, took passages out of it, you know? Actually, when you went to the Rosicrucian Library, the actual first edition of Crowley's books were there at the Lending Library until about 1960. So that's what I mean. There's all this footsie under the table with these different groups, you know? And who would expect that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, oh, and then when Crowley said that he took a trip with Annie Besant on a ship back to England, to blow skiing, that doesn't jive either, because she was on a different boat in a different month, and he stopped in Paris on the way back. It's in his diary. He said you'd have to take the Concorde to get from Cairo back to Scotland when he said he did, So he never went to Cairo when he said he did, right? Okay. Well, Hubbard's eldest son, who changed his name to Ronald E. Wolfe, he was Ronald L. Hubbard Jr., but he said his dad discovered magic when he was young with Crowley's Book of the Law. Then he joined the IMROC, the Rosicrucians, out of it, and later sued because he was publishing their stuff, right? Then he posed as a Swami in the 40s as a hypnotist. And he said using his hypnotism, he came up with his famous book, Dianetics. Okay. But these are the affirmation he used every day. You believe in many gods and spirits. My magical work is powerful and effective. You are a psychic. You can do automatic writing whenever you wish. Nothing can intervene between you and your holy guardian angel, Diana. Well, that should get your attention, because what was the name of his first book? Dianetics. And his daughter's name was Diana. And the yacht that he used for Sea Org was named Diana. So, in Crowley's OTO, the main thing is to, do what thou wilt to hold the law, but it doesn't mean do whatever you want. It means find your true will, which is finding your holy guardian angel. So Hubbard took it literally and thought Diana somehow was his holy guardian angel. Anyway, and it kind of relates to that cult of Dianism, right? So in 1945, Hubbard got out of the Navy, was looking for a place to live, and ended up at Jack Whiteside Parsons' little Agape Lodge in Pasadena, right? Hubbard was charismatic and charming, and I guess he was a great storyteller. And at first he wrote Westerns and science fiction and thrillers, everything. He just wanted to be another Heimlich or somebody at that time, Arthur C. Clarke. Now Parsons was married to Helen Northrop. If you saw the TV show The Strange Angel, it was pretty accurate. They joined the O2, and she became high priestess. This is what I don't get, of the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. Why did they bring Gnosticism and Catholicism into the OTO? I don't get it.
Well, Crowley did convert, or that was one of his, not converted, but he joined the French Gnostic Revival Church in the 19th century. Yeah, or around this. So I think they just continued it.
Was it really Gnostic, or what was it, though? I haven't really researched.
Yeah, it was based on these visions. God, I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman, Daniel, and the other guy on Cathars and Sophia, and that would take another show. We've covered on the show, but basically he was able to really get the names of these historical Cathars and their teachings very accurately. But then there was, again, it was a revival, and Crowley was part of it.
Oh, but it was accurate, not just bullshit.
Yeah, the visions of the Cathars was very accurate. But then, obviously, then the scripture and all that was sort of, I'd say, modernized. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, moving on. So while Helen, Parsons' wife, was away, her little sister, Sarah Betty, who was 17 at the time, she was like, they kind of showed her in the movie as a little vixen, sexual little temptress, And she joined the lodge, and she was known as Sore Cassip. Sounds like ketchup, Cassip, right? Anyway, she dumped Parsons, and Helen dumped Parsons, his wife, and took up with Willard T. Smith, who was the original head of the lodge. And Crowley decided that Parsons was much more suited, but he was smart. he told Smith that he had a vision, and his holy guardian angel spoke to him and said that Smith needed to go on a vision quest to Mexico.
Oh,
Of course, Smith just walked away and did it, But he took Helen with him, and then they had a child together. So their child is like, I don't remember, Sally Parsons Smith. So Parson was originally sleeping with his wife's younger 17-year-old sister, right? But then she fell under Hubbard's spell, right? And then they perpetuated that fraudulent scheme where he got $10,000. They were going to sell yachts in Florida and all this stuff. And, Crowley wrote to him and said, I think he's a con man. Not only did he steal your wife, but your other girl too. So Crowley could see through the whole thing. Anyway, Betty Helen ended up marrying Hubbard bigasmously because he was still married to Margaret Grubb. I don't know if she was any relation to Judy Garland. But Betty was right by his side when he made Dianetics. And she was like his personal auditor, I think your listeners know what an auditor is, right? But their marriage fell apart because he was mentally and physically abusive, and domestic violence is what we call it today. So she attempted to flee. So Hubbard kidnapped her. He strapped her in a chair and repeated over and over again, didn't let her sleep, wouldn't let her eat, wouldn't let her go to the bathroom. You love your husband, you'll never leave him. You love your husband, you never leave him. Well, guess what? That didn't work. So Hubbard kidnapped their daughter, Alexis, and he fled to Cuba with the baby girl. So she finally got a divorce from him after struggling and get him to come back from Cuba. But on his deathbed, he wrote his one daughter, his only daughter, out of his will, right? And then in 1986, long after he's dead, the Scientology orgs, I don't know if it was McCavendish or what, but his lawyers tried to get Betty to sign an affidavit saying that Alexis wasn't Ron L. Hubbard's son, but his son's son, Robert L. Hubbard Jr. And she told him to go put it where the sun never shines. See, that's the problem I have. Was kind of saying before, Gnosticism, in essence, is supposed to be liberating, right? Away from the dogmatic of the monarchy and the Catholic Church and the Pope and the Protestant dogma and all that. But the minute you join one of these groups, it becomes very regimented, and you have degrees you have to do, and there's a leader and a second leader, and you have to follow all these rules. And if you don't, you get kicked out. So what's the point? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's just human nature, but they're not practicing what they preach. And, to me, Theosophy is guilty for trying to cover up Blavatsky's sins, and Scientology, they won't even talk about this stuff, Anyway, so, and then the other thing is, to get even with her, he wrote letters to J. Edgar Hoover saying she was a communist sent by the communism as a plan to ruin his Scientology. And the Bureau wrote him off as quote unquote mentally disturbed individual. Ignore. I mean, he was a sociopath, everything, But anyway, back at the Agape Lodge, he went over Parsons originally, and they did the magical rituals together. He would take notes. Like Parsons at first, did his, what do you call it, solo sex magic, where you masturbate on sigils and talismans and stuff like that and do rituals. But then there came a knock on the door one day, and they were trying to get in touch with the redheaded whore of Babylon. And who shows up at the front door but Marjorie Cameron, who's pale, striking, beautiful redhead. So Jack thought, I conjured her up. What the fuck? I mean, wouldn't you think so too? So he made her he thought it was really his Scarlet Woman, So the three of them began doing what's called the infamous Babylon sex magic ritual, where they tried to create a moon child. But Parsons later wrote they were trying to summon the Antichrist to really bring in this total new age of Crowley's Horus. And, so what if you had to, what did Heath Ledger say as a Joker? Burn it all down and start over again,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so she later married him and she was with him the day that he blew himself up in the garage. He was supposedly making explosives for a film set with mercury fulminate and dropped it. But, other people have speculated he was killed.
Yeah, possible.
But in the beginning, Hubbard would quote from Crowley all the time, and saying that he recommended the Master Theron was the only modern work anything to do with the 17th century and ancient mystery cults. You got to read Crowley, who is my dear, dear friend. Well, he never met Crowley in his life, right? And on one, they have witnesses. He had volunteers on what were called the Sea Org that had to serve on his yacht, I'm sure he had a legitimate captain, etc. But, the cooks and the people that made the beds and served him his food were all volunteers. Well, two women, and one with a pseudonym called Heidi Forrester, says he would lay on top of her, right? As far as she could tell, he had no erection. However, using his hand some way, he managed to get his penis in me, she said. And for the next hour, he didn't move. He didn't do anything at all. But if you know about tantric sex ritual, where you don't climax by ejaculation, that's what he was trying to do, right? He was trying to do tantric sex. There's the other side where you climax and launch it, but, not this one. So later, Forrester was ordered to create where's the moon child we've been working with my Babylon working. And when she couldn't produce one, he called her treasonous and punished her severely and kicked her out of the organization.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So Crowley's son said that his father took Crowley's death in December of 19 very hard, prompting Hubbard to take over the mantle of the beast, is what he thought. He thought he was going to take over Crowley's mantle. And he's quoted as saying, "My father did not worship the devil. He thought he was the devil." And, of course, Scientology will, I think they've given up kind of on suing people over this because it's all documented. But it's kind of like Masonry, I found Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma in a half-price bookstore years ago in Tucson when I lived there, and I read it and I just couldn't understand it. I think you really have to read about 20 different books to understand what the hell he was talking about most of the time. But you'd have to hunt high and low to find a 33-degree Mason or Shriner that's ever even cracked the book. I talked to some of my friends that were, and they said, "Oh yeah, I got all that crap in the garage, but I don't care about that. I'm just, I just like being in the brotherhood." So it's interesting, Anyway, that's about it.
We should probably finish up. We're getting close to 2 hours.
Oh shit! Really? See, I was afraid of that. You just talked too much, Miguel.
Oh my God.
Well, I'm pretty well done. We're going to skip over Mormonism, but I would just sum it up by saying what Crowley said: to start a new belief system or religion, you have to have a charismatic leader. Then you have to make up some sort of an ancient mystic backstory, and then people will jump on board. But my wife did come up with one thing. It was Adler that said, very small portion of our population are leaders and charismatic. The rest of us just want to be followers. And that's because it makes us feel safe and secure to follow and leave it up to somebody else. But some of us are seekers of the truth, and we don't want to follow anybody.
Yeah, she nailed it. Yeah. You spent 2 hours and she nailed it in like 2 sentences. So
Yeah, she really.
next time we're gonna have your wife there, Richard. But
All right.
yeah, I would say, yeah, read Plato's Republic and Noble Lie. Graham, who was he's in the
Mhm.
chat, he's done a lot of things that most religions come from Plato's Noble Lie, most movement secrets. I mean, this stuff was already designed thousands of years ago. But let me bring you, Vance. What do you have to say, or do you have a comment or question?
Well, I don't have a question. There's so much there. It's hard to come up with a particular question. But what I will say is now we all know how to start our own
Religion.
cult
Yeah,
and religion. Right?
It's
Just
well, I was
mush all
just
these
trying
people
to,
together.
I was trying to connect the dots to show the duplicity, and that's the way you start a cult or you start a group. You know, you make up a story, you know.
Well, let's
And
open a shop in downtown Chicago.
yeah, I think so. You know, I don't think there isn't a cult shop in Dallas here that I know. There used to be a really spooky one in Tucson, and it even had a elaborate magic circle in the floor and everything you could think of. But it kind
Well,
of
we're all
creeped me out.
model makers, right? We make models of the universe. You know, we populate them with gods or atoms or strings
Right.
or
Exactly.
quarks.
Big Bang theories or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes, some of
Well,
them
it's
more
true.
useful than others. You know, some of them match what we see happening in the universe, and some of them
Well, yeah,
don't.
my
you
wife
know.
would say if you become obsessed with science, that's not good either. It's not good to be obsessed with any one thing. Moderation, everything. But it's hard to
Yeah.
do. Well, anyway, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
No, this was a wonderful tour, and yeah, you definitely have some very important lessons for everybody. Yeah, for those who watch this show, those are the minority who want to be free, and yeah, at least your microphone survived. Your camera, I guess Cthulhu and the Archons got your camera this
I don't
time,
know
but
what happened.
we could hear you, and most of the traffic comes from audio version. So,
That's
but we
true.
better,
Yeah.
yeah, we better wrap it up for those in the audience. Good conversation. I think Vance and Graham were talking about the nature of reality. Great,
Oh boy.
great back and forth, but and other really cool discussions and interesting comments by the audience. And always appreciate what you have to say. Always appreciate your company and your support. So first, I'll say, Vance, thanks for keeping us company, and I hope no demons grab you on the street. So stay away from the
Well,
street, like the
I
Mad
I
Arab.
got my snake, but that's about as far
The
as I got into the
snake,
Lovecraft.
Yeah, that's see.
I guess
See?
Cthulhu must. The inflation's hurting Cthulhu. Can only afford to send a
For
snake.
one tentacle.
You better put some sigils under your bed tonight. Make sure you're safe.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a California king snake, so no threats. So.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, Richard, always enjoy when you come on the show, and of course, we look forward to the next time. Real quick, give people your books and websites where they can go.
Yeah, just go to Amazon.com. You can go to Amazon.com/author/Richard Weber, and everything's right there. And I
Okay.
forgot to promote my old book, Solomon's Key, because it's all in there. You know, I've
Yeah.
got
Tell the audience about your books real quick.
well, yeah, it starts on the Temple Mount, and this cardinal and this Arab go underneath it, you know, and they find this secret chamber, and they find this secret room with these empty sarcophagi, and one's Jesus and one's Mary, right? And then it's well, there was really a actual nefarious Masonic lodge in Italy that infiltrated the whole government called the Pidui. But I changed
Well,
it to
what's the name of your books? Don't give away the plot.
Solomon's Key, the
Yeah.
Code Club. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And the Richard bases on a lot of real facts. Again, his
Yeah.
his
And the new
research
one-
is just flawless.
And the new one is Predator, the Elite Affair is full of ritual magic too. And I documented it, and the Black Mass was told to me by a lady that said she attended one. So, you know, I like to get my facts, you know, at least halfway straight. No, 100% straight if I can.
There you go. Until the ascended master, White Brother, tells you otherwise.
Yeah,
All right,
we'll be
everybody.
waiting for that telegram.
Yeah. Look in your closet. There's a note.
Yeah, okay.
But everyone, really appreciate it. We do have an AB Live tomorrow. We will be talking about healing trauma through gnosis with Nathan Dubé, who's an excellent chaos magician, great insights on Jung, and was the former editor of the legendary magazine Disinfo. So we will check you out tomorrow, and everybody have a good rest of your evening, and thanks for keeping us company. Take care, everybody.